This episode is sponsored by Foreman School in Litchfield, Connecticut, a coeducational college preparatory school that empowers bright students who learn differently. To learn more about the nation's first and best co-ed school for high school and postgraduate students with learning differences, go to formanschool.org/about/distraction.
Hello and welcome to Distraction. I'm Sarah Guertin, the producer of Distraction, filling in for Dr. Hallowell today to bring you another listener Q&A. We have a guest expert with us today. Her name is Dr. Kelly Miller, and she is the school psychologist at the Foreman School, our wonderful sponsor in Litchfield, Connecticut. Dr. Miller is also a licensed psychologist in the state of New York and Connecticut, and she is an expert on reading testing, and she helps match Foreman students with the right classes for their needs. So we thought Dr. Miller would be perfect to answer today's question. So thank you for being here, Dr. Miller.
My pleasure.
As you know, we like to get right into it, so let's get to today's question. It's from a listener named Shelley, and she wrote, I'm married to a wonderful man with ADHD, and several of my children have ADHD. I'm also a middle school special education teacher, and fully half of my students have ADHD. How can I, as a teacher, help my students learn about their own strengths and weaknesses and provide them with ways to try strategies that will help them succeed? I feel that we fail ADHD kids in school by our own lack of knowing how to help them take ownership of their learning. Shelley. So, what do you think? What can you tell to Shelley, Dr. Miller?
Well, that's a great question, Shelley. And firstly, let me thank you for your service and education, especially during the pandemic, because my goodness, it has been a challenge. So I'm so appreciative of your work and your question. With regard to learning about strengths and weaknesses, that's often something kids kind of innately know. They know what's easy, what's hard for them based upon what they've tried before, or perhaps they know like math is a challenge, but science is easy, or history is really challenging because it's hard to understand what the text says, but math is easier. So a lot of kids do tend to know those things. They tend to know if they can throw a baseball. They tend to know if they're good at dance. They tend to know if they're not so great at, shooting the basketball. So a lot of kids do know what they're good and not so great at. But in the event that they don't, I think giving them access to a huge variety of different activities or tasks is really helpful. And it doesn't have to be anything like you don't have to send your kid off to all these camps and have them try out anything in a higher stress environment or perhaps a more expensive environment, but just giving them the opportunities to try different things in your home environment, in your home community can be wonderful. Ideally, we want to create a low stress environment for these tryouts. And really, to describe them as trials or tryouts is more than fine. We don't want pressure cooker environments here. We want to reduce anxiety associated with trying something new, learning something new. I think it's really, really, really important to create kind of a space, a safe space for having conversations around what's easy, what's hard, trying different strategies, because some strategies will kind of innately come to the student and some strategies really won't. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that by any means. So I think it's really important to be very intentional about how we create space for those conversations. So having, the notion of having feelings around when things are easy and when things are hard. Like, yes, I'm going to feel really great when things are going really well, and I'm not going to feel as great when things aren't going as well or when something is hard for me. Normalize that. Tell your kids what's easy for you, what's hard for you. I think a lot of kids look at adults and they're like, oh, well, life is just easy for you. You have it all together, you know exactly what's going on. You know exactly what you should be doing. And my goodness, I'm sorry, no one knows exactly what they should be doing.
The little secret we learn, right?
Right. We learn as adults. And I think having that conversation with your children in the classroom or your children at home is immensely helpful. So it's a totally normal feeling and it's shared by all people. Mm-hmm. It's not only a sign of self-awareness to talk about what comes easily for you and what comes harder for you, but also a sign of strength. And I think that conveying that to students, knowing what you're good at, knowing where you're going to need some additional help, that's a sign of strength. And that's really what we aim for at Foreman with our students, is just building those self-advocacy skills and helping them to determine what's easy, what's hard, so that they know what to ask for when they go off to college, and they know where they're going to need additional tutoring supports or whatever the case is.
It almost sounds like they also need that practice of speaking up and saying what they know is good for them or bad for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think practicing with a trusted adult, that's their safe space. That's where they have those conversations. And then they can branch out and have, the conversation with the basketball coach saying, I'm not so great at dribbling. I'm learning it, and I'm working on strategies to help with my dribbling skills, but I'm still learning, and that's okay. And so I think having those opportunities to practice those conversations is really good. And just the notion that it's possible to have both strengths and weaknesses, be comfortable holding them both in the same space is really important, and sharing that with students is really important. It's also really important to have, in having these conversations, to discuss with students that sometimes we're going to have good days, and sometimes we're not going to have a great day in learning a new skill or learning a new strategy. And I think that's very, very, very normal. And I think the more that kids learn that that's going to be a normal part of the development of the skill or the strategy that you're working on, that's okay. They need to learn that, things aren't going to go as well. And those opportunities, or those things that don't go as well, present opportunities for learning.
Right.
I'm going to try a strategy that involves using a planner. I'm going to try a paper planner first because that's what's been suggested to me. But I don't tend to use my paper planner, or even if I fill it out, I don't look back at it. Right? And so we have a lot of kids who will do this at Foreman.
I have one of those at home.
Right. So you get all organized, and you feel really great about using your planner, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I didn't actually review it to make sure that I knew when my meeting was or what homework assignment was due. Okay, so maybe we don't actually look at the paper planner, but what do we look at most often? Our phones.
Right.
Or our computers. And so can we use some of the techniques of using a paper planner? Maybe it's looking at that month at a glance and knowing when long-term assignments are coming due, or maybe it's scheduling out your day by the hour that is most helpful for the student. And so we incorporate that in some sort of electronic format instead. We use an app, or we use some sort of kind of planning device on the computer or the phone to help us keep track of our work and plan our day. So using those kind of not failed, but difficult experiences with learning a new strategy, and using that as a learning tool for your toolkit to say that didn't work, but here's what I'm going to try next. Having those conversations, I think, is really, really important. And most importantly, the belief that strategies will help them, I think, needs to be kind of top of mind and fully in focus. A lot of students, especially, the older that they get, they think that strategies aren't super helpful for whatever reason, because they've tried different strategies before, and they've maybe tried it for a day or two, and then they've hit that roadblock where things didn't go as well. And so then they said, no, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to try this strategy anymore. Knowing that they are going to hit those roadblocks, and we're going to use that as a learning opportunity as opposed to just throwing the baby out with the bathwater, if you will. Knowing that we're going to have those weaknesses and those challenge areas, and then moving forward is very helpful.
I love that. I mean, it sounds like communication and adjustments are kind of the key.
Yes. And so it's really helpful to consider when you're going to have those conversations, if you're a teacher with a student or a parent with a child, how you're going to hold and initiate those conversations ahead of when you actually have those conversations is really important. So yes, you've given your student the strategy to use the paper planner, and you've said, Johnny, I want you to use this for a week and let me know how it goes. Johnny's probably not going to use it consistently, and he's going to have some slip-ups.
He might lose it.
Right. So always have backups, A.
Yeah.
But B, knowing that those are challenge areas for Johnny, at the end of the week, you're going to say, okay, well, tell me what worked. Tell me what didn't work. Let's think about how it didn't work and what we might do differently next time. but not having negative reactions to the fact that Johnny didn't fill it out on Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday. He really tried hard on Monday, and Friday he remembered he had it. You know, it's knowing your student, knowing your child ahead of time, and trying to have those conversations in as positive a way as possible. I think is very, very important.
Yeah.
And certainly, you know, having that mindset of strategy use is what will help me succeed, because we all have strengths and weaknesses. Yeah. And so using strategies to work on our challenge areas is really important. And goal setting is wildly important as well. So if you have a student with a goal, he wants to turn in his homework more often, Johnny wants to turn in his homework more often, then that's our goal. That's why we're going to use a planner. Mm-hmm. And so kind of figuring out the why behind the strategy use is really important as well.
Yeah. Well, you've definitely given us a lot to think about. You can find Dr. Miller at the Foreman School, and we thank them very much for being a sponsor of our podcast. They're in beautiful Litchfield, Connecticut. And thank you, Dr. Miller, for being here today.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Distraction is created by Sounds Great Media. This podcast was recorded and produced by the wonderful Sarah Guertin. The episode you just heard was sponsored by the Foreman School in Litchfield, Connecticut. Foreman gives students who learn differently the resources to discover what they care about, to find success in a huge range of fields, and to just be themselves beyond their diagnoses. Learn more about the nation's first and best co-ed school for high school and postgraduate students with learning differences at formanschool.org/about/distraction.